One unnecessarily long and obnoxiously detailed deep dive into a book your neurology and biology professors may have warned you about. Peter Watts's Blindsight. A book about a ship full of DSM-4 diagnoses, including at least 1.5 psychopaths, who go looking for aliens, only to find out that the real alien was the consciousness they used along the way. This book is hard sci-fi, it is horror, it deals with first contact. It has also been released under the Creative Commons license. I will leave a link in the down below to the author's website where you can get the full text of the book, the license agreement, some of his other writings, his blog, extended author notes, all kinds of fun stuff. So if anything I says interests you at any point in the video, I would suggest that you go and read the book yourself. If you want to bookmark it, you're probably going to need a physical copy. I would call this a medium grade book. It's not the hardest book I've ever read. It is not the hardest book I've ever read, but it is definitely not Shel Silverstein or Stephen King, for that matter. Peter Watts is a biologist. He does use some $10 biology words. There are absolutely words and concepts in this book that you may not have seen before, that you may not know about, that you might have to look up if you're interested in what they actually mean. But I wouldn't call it too difficult. I don't think it's reference material. Another thing that makes this medium grade rather than easy or hard is that Peter Watts writes as if he is writing poetry. He is not interested in conveying information in the most digestible way. This is a first-person point of view, and he is putting you in a place and a time and a mindset. He uses words that Siri would use, that Siri does not necessarily bother to stop mid-thought and explain to himself what something is. That doesn't exist. You're going to have to pick it up from context. I have found editors who have a lot of problem with that, but I don't agree. I don't agree. I think Peter Watts is doing just fine on his own. I got through this book without too much trouble. Am I saying that you should give this to a 6th grader? Probably not. Certainly not right now. I'm fairly sure 6th graders can't read anymore. At least that's what the internet tells me. But for someone who could read, I think I would call this a medium grade book. I wouldn't call it too difficult, but it is not easy. It is not an easy book. If you need somebody to just explain the plot to you, well, that's what I'm here for. You can just listen to me. It's fine. Since it has been released under the Creative Commons license, that gives me some leeway in how much of this book I can quote for you. I'm pretty sure I could read the entire thing without getting into too much trouble, but I'll leave that for you. With all of that out of the way, we actually start on a playground. I know for the epilepsy. You think I don't know? But you were in that half. Or like, part of you was. He struggled with the words, with the concept behind them. And now you're different. It's like your mom and dad murdered you. My mom and dad, I said, suddenly quiet, saved my life. I would have died. I think you did die, said my best and only friend. I think Siri died. They scooped him out and threw him away, and you're some whole other kid that just grew back out of what was left. You're not the same. Ever since, you're not the same. You could make a case for what he said. I do remember Helen telling me how difficult it was to adjust, like you had a whole new personality, she said. And why not? There's a reason they call it radical hemispherectomy. Half the brain thrown out with yesterday's krill, the remaining half press-ganged into double duty. Think of all the rewiring that one lonely hemisphere must have struggled with as it tried to take up the slack. It turned out okay, obviously. The brain's a very flexible piece of meat. It took some doing, but it adapted. I adapted. Still, think of all that must have been squeezed out, deformed, reshaped by the time the renovations were through. You could argue that I'm a different person than the one who used to occupy this body. So I survived that and a million other childhood experiences. I grew up and I got along. I learned to fit in. I observed, recorded, derived the algorithms, and mimicked appropriate behaviors. Not much of it was heartfelt, I guess the word is. I had friends and enemies, just like everyone else. I chose them by running through checklists of behaviors and circumstances compiled from years of observation. I may have grown up distant, but I grew up objective, and I have Robert Puglino to thank for that. His seminal observation set everything in motion. It led me into synthesis, fated me to our disastrous encounter with the Scramblers, spared me the worst fate befalling Earth. Or the better one, I suppose, depending on your point of view. Point of view matters. I see that now. Blind, talking to myself, trapped in a coffin falling past the edge of the solar system. I see it for the first time since some beaten, bloody friend on a childhood battlefield convinced me to throw my own point of view away. He may have been wrong. I may have been. But that distance, that chronic sense of being an alien among your own kind, it's not entirely a bad thing. It came in especially handy when the real aliens came calling. Imagine you are Siri Keeton. Due to epilepsy as a child, you have had a hemispherectomy, which means that they cut out half of your brain. You believe that because of this hemispherectomy, you have lost your emotions, your empathy, possibly even your humanity. That is not one of the known side effects of a hemispherectomy. A hemispherectomy is, yes, where they cut out half of your brain, but it is a standard treatment for some forms of epilepsy, and for the right patient, it can do an awful lot of good. I can find no studies that suggest that having a hemispherectomy radically changes your behavior. I can only find one case study in which a child developed behavior issues after having a hemispherectomy, but they went away when the medication was changed. So it wasn't due to the hemispherectomy. There are people who have taken issue with this depiction of a radical hemispherectomy. It has been called ableism. I can say it seems like something I wouldn't necessarily say myself. Certainly not where anyone who has had a hemispherectomy could hear. That doesn't seem like a great idea. Siri Keeton is not canonically autistic. Autism is mentioned in this book. It exists in this universe. It's referenced, I think, a total of 3 times, but no characters in this book are canonically autistic. This was written in 2006. I was trying to remember earlier what 2006 was like, and I find I can barely remember. It was like 3 apocalypses ago. But from what I do recall, autism was somewhere between small white boys who couldn't talk and Rain Man. It wasn't the dark ages of autism research, but they weren't quite as enlightened as we are now, which is a shame because Siri Keeton is absolutely coded as autistic. It explains quite a few of his quirks. It explains why he has trouble relating to people. It explains why he watches TV and has to do research to figure out how to get along in polite society. It explains why he wears a mask. It explains his flat affect. It explains how he excels at putting together disparate pieces of a puzzle in order to tell the boys back home what's going on. It also explains the reason he feels like an alien among his own kind. What it does not explain is his supposed lack of emotion, his supposed lack of empathy, his supposed lack of humanity. Those are not autistic traits. Siri Keeton claims to have no emotion, no empathy, no humanity. Siri Keeton is an unreliable narrator. Vampires did this all the time, you remember. It was normal for them. It was their own unique take on resource conservation. They could have taught your kind a few things about restraint if that absurd aversion to right angles hadn't done them in at the dawn of civilization. Maybe they still can. They're back now, after all, raised from the grave with the voodoo of paleogenetics, stitched together from junk genes and fossil marrow, steeped in the blood of sociopaths and high-functioning autistics. One of them commands this very mission. A handful of his genes live on in your own body, so it too can rise from the dead, here at the edge of interstellar space. Nobody gets past Jupiter without becoming part vampire. Did I forget to mention there were vampires in this book? There are vampires in this book. While the story of how vampires were brought back from extinction is not actually covered all that deeply in this book, we do have that information because Peter Watts did a talk on it. It is also available on his website in PDF form, complete with what I believe are the original slides. The quick version is that vampires are a subspecies of humans. They existed sometime between the time of the Neanderthals and the dawn of civilization when they all went extinct. They were able to interbreed with humans for at least a little while, which means that all of their DNA is still hanging around. It's just not expressed. At some point, an evil corporation, in an attempt to cure autism using gene therapy, managed to make a vampire who very quickly died. And then they perfected the process by experimenting on inmates in Texas prisons. The talk is from the marketing department of this evil corporation who is telling you how they have decided to monetize vampires. Because if vampires actually existed, Jeff Bezos would absolutely try to monetize them. They went extinct because vampires have what is known as a crucifix glitch. It is a problem in their visual cortex. When right angles take up more than, I think, 40% of their visual field, they have grand mal seizures. This is why they went extinct, because we started building things at right angles. And of course, it also explains why they don't deal well with crucifixes. It's kind of an interesting idea. I would recommend that you read that talk if you have more interest in how vampires work, because like I said, it is not really covered in this book. Okay, so vampires have to eat humans because they can't synthesize a certain protein that only humans make, right? But this protein is only synthesized from a Y chromosome. Like, I looked it up. And yeah, like, biology is messy. You're going to find a few women with a Y chromosome, and you're going to find a few, apparent men without a Y chromosome. Like, biology is messy, but the vast, vast majority of humans. You're only going to get this protein from a dude. So, does that mean vampires only ate men? But we do have a vampire character in this book. The captain of the Theseus is named Juka Sarasti, and he is a vampire. And I actually think I like him more than I like Siri Keeton. Not because he's a vampire, but because he's somewhat more honest than Siri Keeton is. To himself, to us, to everyone. I don't like Siri Keeton. He's not my favorite person. I would not invite this man to have dinner at my house. You'll find out more about why Siri Keeton is kind of a douchebag as we go on. But suffice to say, I am not the biggest fan. Along with Siri Keeton and Juga Sarasti, who is the commander of the Theseus, we also have Susan James, who is a linguist and has multiple personalities. She is known as the Gang of Four. Susan James is the one with the surname, the Body, but she is also joined by Michelle, Sasha, and Cruncher, who are separate personalities. I'll note that Michelle has synesthesia, while none of the others do. I don't know how that works. While it is spoken of as if it is multiple personalities in this book, I'll note that right now it is called dissociative identity disorder. It is no longer called multiple personality disorder. I am not a medical doctor. I am not a psychologist. I am not a physicist. I am not a philosopher. I am not a neurologist. I am not a biologist. I'm just a little autistic girl who collects esoteric special interests like some of us collect trains. So, commander of the Theseus, Juka Sarasti. Siri Keeton is a synthesist. I am the bridge between the bleeding edge and the dead center. I stand between the Wizard of Oz and the man behind the curtain. I am the curtain. I am not an entirely new breed. My roots reach back to the dawn of civilization, but those precursors served a different function, a less honorable one. They only greased the wheels of social stability. They would sugarcoat unpleasant truths or inflate imaginary boogeymen for political expedience. They were vital enough in their way. Not even the most heavily armed police state can exert brute force on all of its citizens all of the time. Meme management is so much subtler. The rose-tinted refraction of perceived reality, the contagious fear of threatening alternatives. There have always been those tasked with the rotation of informational topologies, but throughout most of history they had little to do with increasing its clarity. The new millennium changed all that. We've surpassed ourselves now. We're exploring terrain beyond the limits of merely human understanding. Sometimes its contours, even in conventional space, are just too intricate for our brains to track. Other times, its very axes extend into dimensions inconceivable to minds built for fucking and fighting on some prehistoric grassland. So many things constrain us from so many directions. The most altruistic and sustainable philosophies fail before the brute brainstem imperative of self-interest. Subtle and elegant equations predict the behavior of the quantum world, but none can explain it. After 4,000 years, we can't even prove that reality exists beyond the mind of the first-person dreamer. We have such need of intellects greater than our own, but we're not very good at building them. The forced matings of minds and electrons succeed and fail with equal spectacle. Our hybrids become as brilliant as savants and as autistic. We graft people to prosthetics, make their overloaded motor strips juggle meat and machinery, and shake our heads when their fingers twitch and their tongues stutter. Computers bootstrap their own offspring, grow so wise and incomprehensible that their communiques assume the hallmarks of dementia, unfocused and irrelevant to the barely intelligent creatures left behind. And when your surpassing creations find the answers you asked for, you can't understand their analysis, and you can't verify their answers. You have to take their word on faith. Or you use information theory to flatten it for you, to squash the tesseract into 2 dimensions and the Klein bottle into 3, to simplify reality and pray to whatever gods survived the millennium that your honorable twisting of the truth hasn't ruptured any of its load-bearing pylons. You hire people like me, the crossbred progeny of profilers and proof assistants and information theorists. In formal settings, you'd call me synthesist. On the street, you'd call me jargonaut or poppy. If you're one of those savants whose hard-won truths are being bastardized and lobotomized for powerful know-nothings, interested only in market share, you might call me a mole or a chaperone, which means he's basically an observer. Susan James and the entire Gang of 4 are linguists. We also have a biologist, Spendell, Isaac Spendell, and a military liaison named Amanda Bates. Along with this crew of humans and humanoids, we have the ship Theseus itself, known in the book as the Captain, has some sort of AI. So it is able to captain itself, but we don't actually meet the captain much in this book. We don't get to know the captain. The captain is just the ship. It is considered its own captain, but the commander is Juka Sarasti, the vampire. Yes, the vampire is commanding the ship. Let's talk about where they are. This is the solar system. I did not buy this, it came with the house. It is also not to scale. If it were to scale, and Earth were about 2 inches big, then Jupiter, the big one, would be about 21.5 inches around and about 2 miles in that direction. Either way, it is in the correct order. It is missing an asteroid belt, somewhere right around here. That's the asteroids that Jupiter herds around the inner solar system. I don't know if you know this, but Jupiter always wanted to be a shepherd, but ended up as a planet instead. This does not have Pluto on it. I know. Pluto is part of what's called the Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt extends from Neptune, which is the blue one right here, extends from about here, from Neptune, out about another 4.4 billion miles from the sun. So it's a big flat donut. Somewhere in the Kuiper Belt, you've got Pluto and Charon spinning around each other like lovesick teenagers at their first prom. Who needs to be a planet when you find your soulmate? It is possible that there is a giant llama floating somewhere to the south of Neptune, but the American government has no comment on that. Pluto and Charon, by the way, currently about 3.3 billion miles away from the sun. The sun, you'll note, not actually on here. We'll just assume that entire wall is the sun. We'll just make that assumption. Either way, sun not on here, but about 3.3 billion miles away from the sun. Currently, that's where Pluto and Charon are. Voyager 1, which is the farthest man-made object from Earth that we know of, is about 16 billion miles away from the sun. So it's quite a ways past Pluto and Charon, which, again, only 3.3 billion miles. That's not much. That's not much. So 16 billion miles, you've got Voyager 1. If you keep going, somewhere way, way in that direction, we're talking 186 billion miles from the sun, we believe there's a thing called the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is a sphere of stuff, dust, ice, planetoids, planetesimals, comets, asteroids, random bits of rock, at least one ceramic teapot. I don't make the rules. It's out there, about 186 billion miles away from the sun, we think. We don't actually know. It's a theory. But that's where we think all of the very long-term comets come from, would be the Oort cloud. If the Oort cloud actually exists and is where we think it is, Voyager 1 will reach it in around 300 years, or about 238 years after Siri Keeton. So the crew of the Theseus has overslept by 5 years and woken up in the Oort cloud. That's not where they were meant to be woken up. They were meant to be woken up in the Kuiper Belt, but we'll get to that. This is, of course, not the beginning of the story. In fact, according to Siri Keeton, that's the end of the story. His story begins on that playground. But we also deal with flashbacks to Siri Keeton's life before he woke up in the Oort cloud. In the first of them, we are introduced to Heaven, which is a virtual reality world that people move into as a sort of bootstrapped afterlife. We pick up the story of past Siri Keeton as his mother's body, his mother's name is Helen, by the way, is being moved from the viewing room of Heaven to long-term storage. She has decided to move in permanently. So they are saying kind of goodbye to his mother. His mother is not presented as a likable person. She is very self-involved, possibly narcissistic, although that word is not used in this text. But she is not the best mother. Siri Keeton much prefers his absentee father, who is also introduced in this scene as a much more honorable and likable man than Siri's mother. But we can talk about that later. And that is where the story, or at least the part of the story that we care about, starts. It starts with the Fireflies. It was 10:35 Greenwich Mean Time, February 13th, 2082. They clinched around the world like a fist, each black as the inside of an event horizon until those last bright moments when they all burned together. They screamed as they died. Every radio up to geostat groaned in unison. Every infrared telescope went briefly snowblind. Ashes stained the sky for weeks afterwards. Mesospheric clouds high above the jet stream turned to glowing rust with every sunrise. The objects, apparently, consisted largely of iron. Nobody ever knew what to make of that. For perhaps the first time in history, the world knew before being told. If you'd seen the sky, you had the scoop. The usual arbiters of newsworthiness, stripped of their accustomed role in filtering reality, had to be content with merely labeling it. It took them 90 minutes to agree on Fireflies. A half hour after that, the first Fourier transforms appeared in the news sphere. To no one's great surprise, the Fireflies had not wasted their dying breaths on static. There was pattern embedded in that terminal chorus, some cryptic intelligence that resisted all earthly analysis. The experts, rigorously empirical, refused to speculate. They only admitted that the Fireflies had said something. They didn't know what. Everyone else did. How else would you explain 65,536 probes, evenly dispersed along a lat-long grid that barely left any square meter of planetary surface unexposed. Obviously, the flies had taken our picture. The whole world had been caught with its pants down in panoramic composite freeze frame. We'd been surveyed. Whether as a prelude to formal introductions or outright invasion was anyone's guess. So we've just had our picture taken. And now we have no idea what's going on. Eventually, we find a signal from an apparent comet in the Kuiper Belt, out past Neptune. And we start sending things to look at it. Siri Keeton and the Theseus are in the third wave. But we start with the first wave. I am unmanned. I am disposable. I am souped up and stripped down, a telematter drive with a couple of cameras bolted to the front end, pushing G's that would turn meat to jelly. I sprint joyously toward the darkness, my twin brother a stereoscopic 100 clicks to starboard, dual streams of backspat pions boosting us to relativity before poor old Theseus had even crawled past Mars. But now, 6 billion kilometers to stern, Mission Control turns off the tap and leaves us coasting. The comet swells in our sights, a frozen enigma sweeping its signal across the sky like a lighthouse beam. We bring rudimentary senses to bear and stare it down on 1,000 wavelengths. We've lived for this moment. We see an erratic wobble that speaks of recent collisions. We see scars, smooth, icy expanses where once acne skin had liquefied and refrozen, far too recently for the insignificant sun at our backs to be any kind of suspect. We see an astronomical impossibility, a comet with a heart of refined iron. Burns Caulfield sings as we glide past. Not to us. It ignores our passage as it ignored our approach. It sings to someone else entirely. Perhaps we'll meet that audience someday. Perhaps they're waiting in the desolate wastelands ahead of us. Mission Control flips us onto our backs, keeps us fixed on target past any realistic hope of acquisition. They send last-ditch instructions, squeeze our fading signals for every last bit among the static. I can sense their frustration, their reluctance to let us go. Once or twice, we're even asked if some judicious mix of thrust and gravity might let us linger here a bit longer, but deceleration is for pansies. We're headed for the stars. Bye, Burnsy. Bye, Mission Control. Bye, Soul. See you at heat death. The second wave, moving somewhat slower and with a lot more telemetry, shows up, gets a lock on this comet, and the comet explodes. Could have been a self-destruct, could have been something else. We don't actually get that information in this book, but the comet is no longer there. The comet go bye-bye. And as mentioned, this is hard sci-fi. There is no faster-than-light travel, so the third wave, the Theseus and its entire complement, are already on the way there. So they get to the Kuiper Belt, and there's nothing there to see anymore. And that is when Theseus finds something in the Oort cloud and goes to take a look. It's found what is called in the book an Oasa emitter. That is not a word in the real world, but it is named after a real person. It is named after Jumiko Owasso, who wrote a paper along with some colleagues about things in the universe that are bigger than Jupiter, but smaller than brown dwarfs. And they're called, in the book, Oasa emitters. The one they find is somewhere in the Oort cloud. It is a giant Jupiter, basically, but it's not quite big enough to be a brown dwarf. So it's got lots of gravity, lots of radiation, a huge magnetic field, but it's a little dim for us to find right now, which is what Peter Watts needed, something local, something strong enough to sustain a super Jovian magnetic field, and somewhat dim enough that we weren't going to find it for the next, 70 or 80 years. They named this one Big Ben. In the past, we are introduced to Chelsea. She is a neuroaestheticist, and that means she can tweak people's brains. For instance, changing their taste in music. There's not a lot of call for that anymore, so she lives on the public charity like a lot of people in this world do. And she is set up on a date with Siri by Pag, his childhood friend, his only friend. We are told that she's a bit of a kinky girl because she prefers to have sex in person. In the book of Blindsight, people stopped doing that. That's not a thing people do. They get their sex through other means. They don't have sex in person anymore. She prefers her sex to be in person, which is strange according to the universe that she lives in. But Siri finds that he kind of likes her, so they start a relationship. So they approach Big Ben, since this is the only thing they can find out here, and they find things orbiting Big Ben. Not just orbiting, they are picking up matter from the surrounding Oort cloud and then doing something to the planet. They call them skimmers. They seem to dive into the planet's atmosphere, release some sort of gas, and then come back out. They think this might be related to agriculture, but they don't actually know anything about them. They're not talking to us. They don't even seem to notice our existence. They're just there doing things. Susan wants to try to talk to them. And this is where we get into technology implies belligerence. Technology implies belligerence, they said. I suppose I should explain that now that it's completely irrelevant. You've probably forgotten after all this time. Once there were 3 tribes. The optimists, whose patron saints were Drake and Sagan, believed in a universe crawling with gentle intelligence. Spiritual brethren, vaster and more enlightened than we, a great galactic siblinghood into whose ranks we would someday ascend. Surely, said the optimist, space travel implies enlightenment, for it requires the control of great destructive energies. Any race that can't rise above its own brutal instincts will wipe itself out long before it learns to bridge the interstellar gulf. Across from the optimists sat the pessimists, who genuflected before graven images of Saint Fermi and a host of lesser lightweights. The pessimist envisioned a lonely universe, full of dead rocks and slime. The odds are just too low, they insisted. Too many rogues, too much radiation, too much eccentricity, and too many orbits. It is a surpassing miracle that even one Earth exists. To hope for many is to abandon reason and embrace religious mania. After all, the universe is 14 billion years old. If the galaxy were alive with an intelligence, wouldn't it be here by now? Equidistant to the other 2 tribes sat the historians. They didn't have too many thoughts on the probable prevalence of intelligent spacefaring extraterrestrials. But if there are any, they said, they're not just going to be smart, they're going to be mean. It might seem almost too obvious a conclusion. What is human history if not an ongoing succession of greater technologies grinding lesser ones beneath their boots? But the subject wasn't merely human history, or the unfair advantage that tools gave to any given side. The oppressed snatched up advanced weaponry as readily as the oppressor, given half a chance. No, the real issue was how those tools got there in the first place. The real issue was what tools are for. To the historians, tools existed for only one reason: to force the universe into unnatural shapes. They treated nature as an enemy. They were, by definition, a rebellion against the way things were. Technology is a stunted thing in benign environments. It never thrived in any culture gripped by belief in natural harmony. Why invent fusion reactors if your climate is comfortable, if your food is abundant? Why build fortresses if you have no enemies? Why force change upon a world that poses no threat? Human civilization had a lot of branches not so long ago. Even into the 21st century, a few isolated tribes had barely developed stoned tools. Some settled down with agriculture, others weren't content until they had ended nature itself. Still others until they'd built cities in space. We all rested eventually, though. Each new technology trampled lesser ones, climbed to some complacent asymptote, and stopped, until my own mother packed herself away like larva and honeycomb, softened by machinery, robbed of incentive by her own contentment. But history never said that everyone had to stop where we did. It only suggested that those who had stopped no longer struggled for existence. There could be other, more hellish worlds where the best human technology would crumble, where the environment was still the enemy, where the only survivors were those who fought back with sharper tools and stronger empires. The threat contained in those environments would not be simple ones. Harsh weather and natural disasters either kill you or they don't, and once conquered or adapted to, they lose their relevance. No, the only environmental factors that continued to matter were those that fought back, that countered new strategies with newer ones, that forced their enemies to scale ever greater heights just to stay alive. Ultimately, the only enemy that mattered was an intelligent one. And if the best toys do end up in the hands of those who've never forgotten that life itself is an act of war against intelligent opponents, what does that say about a race whose machines travel between the stars? Back to Chelsea. Siri's having some problems because Chelsea's acting strangely. She wants to know things about him. She wants to talk to him. She wants to give him little tweaks to make him happier. And he doesn't like any of this. Siri Keeton is a bioessentialist. We used to call them biotruthers back in the 2010s. We don't like these people. And I'm not really going to get into it because it is a very deep, very dark black hole of the internet. But suffice to say that Siri believes that women are like this because they were just evolved that way and they don't have a choice. And men are like that because they were just evolved that way and they don't have a choice. We're not fans of Siri Keeton. Back on the Theseus, the crew sends out some probes in different directions to come at the skimmers from an angle to see what else they can find. And as soon as one of the probes gets outside of a certain radius of the ship, it starts to see something. There is a ship cloaking itself only from Theseus. So Theseus changes course and starts moving directly towards this ship. And that is when the ship starts talking to them in English. The ship is talking to them in English. It calls itself Rorschach. And it says, "Hi, Theseus. Welcome to the neighborhood. Don't come here. You wouldn't like it here. It's dangerous for you here. There's a lot of things that you don't deal well with. so you should stay away. It's for your own good. So Susan and the gang start talking to Rorschach, trying to figure out what it's talking about, why it's saying don't come here, why it's saying to stay away. Get more information. And as it talks, the longer it talks, the more the hair on my head stood up. Because if you've worked with computers as long as I have, you will start to recognize that this isn't a person talking. It's a large language model. It's not called a large language model in the book. It's not called anything in the book. Large language models, as we know them now, did not exist in 2006. Instead, they had what they called the Chinese room, which is kind of a thought experiment. You put a person in a room with a whole bunch of rules, books full of rules that say things like, if you receive these squiggles in this configuration, you should send back those squiggles in that configuration. And if you do that correctly, the person on the outside of the room will believe that you speak Chinese, even though you don't. I hate to be the one to break this to you, but that's how large language models work. To be clear, large language models are an amazing piece of technology. We finally got a computer to mimic human speech in a way that will fool most people into thinking the computer understands what it's saying. I cannot explain to you exactly how dumb computers are because you wouldn't believe me if I tried. Unless, of course, you've worked with computers as long as I have. Trust me when I tell you, computers are dumb. They are incredibly dumb. They know the difference between on and off. I'm not even sure they know the difference. They can just store the difference between on and off, which makes ones and zeros, which makes binary, which everything we think is intelligent is actually built on top of. The ability to store on and off. So the ability to mimic human language is an amazing, amazing thing that we did. Because before, computers couldn't do that. Unfortunately, we decided that meant they were smart and could actually understand the words they're saying. Here I am telling you. ChatGPT does not understand English or any other language you type into it. ChatGPT does not speak language. It is mimicking human language. It is taking in your squiggles in your configuration, and it is deciding that 98% of the time, when someone sends in squiggles in this configuration, I should send back squiggles in that configuration. And it has fooled you into thinking that it understands the words it is saying. It does not understand the words it is saying. LLMs do not hallucinate. They do not lie. They don't understand the language. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what those squiggles mean. They don't know what words are. Either way, at the time, this was not called an LLM. It was called a Chinese room, or at least that is the thought experiment that Peter Watts uses to tell us what an LLM or a Chinese room is. They figure out that Rorschach does not understand the language that it is using, that it is a Chinese room. It is mimicking human language, which means no one's there, right? There's some sort of automated answering service using an LLM talking to us. That means there's nobody in that ship. I mean, if there were somebody in that ship, they would talk to us. We would find some way to communicate. That's not what, there's no one there. There can't be anyone there. maybe the ship is sent ahead, and the people who are actually planning on using this ship, they're going to come later. But for right now, like, it's just a machine. There's no one there. So they launch a probe directly at Rorschach. And the second it sticks to Rorschach, we're able to actually see it. Imagine a crown of thorns, twisted, dark, and unreflective, grown too thickly tangled to ever rest on any human head. Put it in orbit around a failed star whose own reflected half-light does little more than throw its satellites into silhouette. Occasional bloody highlights glinted like dim embers from its twists and crannies. They only emphasize the darkness everywhere else. Imagine an artifact that embodies the very notion of torture. Something so wrenched and disfigured that even across uncounted light years and unimaginable differences in biology and outlook, you can't help but feel that somehow the structure itself is in pain. Now make it the size of a city. Back in the past, Siri has been selected for the mission to go find what's making this signal out past Neptune. So he says goodbye to his mother for perhaps the last time. And she suggests that there was abuse, or at the very least, abandonment by their father when Siri was a child. Siri doesn't know what she's talking about. He doesn't really believe her. We can talk about that later. In the meantime, we're back on the ship. This probe that they sent to Rorschach has blown a hole in the side of the ship and then inflated an inflatable with the gas that is present inside Rorschach. So it cuts a little hole and it fills up this inflatable base camp with the gas that is inside Rorschach. And the crew decide to do a little bit of breaking and entering, as one does. They're sending probes, but the probes, you can't shield them enough. The radiation keeps killing the probes, so you're not really getting a whole lot of information. All of these automated probes, they go in, they eventually die, they get lost. They're not doing us any good over there. They can't increase the shielding anymore because if they did, well, then the probes wouldn't be able to see anything. They do know that there is no oxygen in the atmosphere inside Rorschach, which Spindell says means that there can't be anything but anaerobic bacteria over there. In order to get large animals, you need oxygen. So it's possible the atmosphere isn't quite ready yet for the people who are meant to inhabit this ship. It's making oxygen somehow, and it's just not gotten there yet. Either way, there's not enough oxygen on the ship to support large animal life or intelligent species. All you've got going on over there is anaerobic bacteria. So they decide that the humans are going to have to suit up and go over there because it takes a while for radiation to kill people. They'll last longer than the probes will. And they can get back to the ship and have their little death pods resurrect them. They'll have their biologist cut out whatever tumors happen to grow. The radiation won't kill them immediately, so the humans are the best option. Sarasti tells Siri that he's going. And Siri says, wait, no, I'm an observer. And Sarasti says, exact quote, "On Earth, you're a synthesist. In the Kuiper, you're a synthesist. Here, you're mass. Do what you're told." Siri decides he's a decoy. There are 3 actually useful people, and he's just going to be there to give one more body to shoot at in the hopes that they shoot at him instead of one of the important people. Siri decides that he is a decoy. Strange things happen to humans who are exposed to extreme environments. Electrical charge, magnetic waves, radiation, sounds, accidents, disease, toxins, certain frequencies. Strange things happen to humans. And I want to be clear that absolutely nothing that happens to the humans in Rorschach is made up. Peter Watts brought receipts. And this is where the horror starts. Absolutely horrifying things are happening to the crew on Rorschach. Religious experiences, hearing things, seeing things, feeling things. One of the crew decides that they're dead. They've thought about it and come to the rational conclusion that they no longer exist. Another one, absolutely having a religious experience. Siri Keeton is trying very hard to ignore whatever happens to be tapping him on the shoulder because he knows it has to be a hallucination. They're all hallucinating. Absolutely horrifying things going on in this ship that I won't necessarily get too deep into because, as you know, when you explain horror, it just sounds silly. But this is where all the horror starts in this book. Bit of a creepy atmosphere up until now. We don't like the LLM. That makes us nervous. We don't like that the LLM told them to stay away. That makes us nervous too. But the actual horror starts when the crew enters Rorschach and starts looking around. So they go into Rorschach, do a little bit of looking around. Bad things happen to them. And then they make it back to Theseus and go back into their death pods to be rebuilt. Because, of course, they were killing themselves, hanging out in Rorschach, too much radiation. Meanwhile, in the past, Siri has allowed Chelsea to try and tweak him to make him a little bit happier temporarily. While she's doing this, she triggers a memory. Yeah? And how are you going to stop me, you little geek? You can't even make the time to find out what's going on in your own family. You think you can control me all the way from fucking orbit? You think... Suddenly, nothing came from the living room but soft choking sounds. I peeked around the corner. My father had Helen by the throat. I think, he growled, that I can stop you from doing anything to Siri ever again if I have to, and I think you know that. And then she saw me. And then he did. And my father took his hand from around my mother's neck, and his face was utterly unreadable. But there was no mistaking the triumph on hers. I just want to be absolutely clear on this. Putting your hands around the throat of another human being and threatening to kill them is abuse. It's not treated as abuse in this book. In fact, it's treated as if his mother choreographed that. I mean, I guess it's possible she has a gun pointed at Siri's father's head from somewhere off script that we don't see, which is going to force him to put his hands around her throat and threaten to kill her. But it's not actually in the text. That's something we would just have to make up. But she can't make him do that. That is a choice that Siri's father made. Siri's mother was giving him some sort of hormone meant to promote bonding between a mother and a child. Personally, I find that uncomfortable. I'm not sure I like that. But in this universe, in this book, it does not require a prescription. So you can just get it's over the counter. It's over the counter medicine, and it appears to be in somewhat of wide use, or at least wide enough that it's over the counter and easy to get. And Siri's mother has been using this on Siri in some attempt to, I don't know, make him human again. And when Siri's father finds out, he threatens to kill her. It is possible that Siri's father believes that this is abusive. I do get that idea. He doesn't think that this should be done. He does believe this is some sort of abuse. But if you believe a child is being abused, you do not leave them in that situation. You certainly don't threaten to kill their abuser and then continue to leave them in that situation. If a child is being abused, you remove the child from that situation. That is the right answer. Humans don't always make right answers, and I understand that. But putting your hands around someone's throat and threatening to kill them is called abuse. It's not treated as abuse in this book. Siri continues to believe that his mother is entirely at fault and his father is a good person. I don't think that either parent is all that great. The mother, certainly, I don't think is wonderful. But the father is absolutely abusive on at least one occasion. On at least one occasion, Siri remembers him being abusive. And other than that, is mostly absentee. So I'm not sure that either parent is great. But I will say in this text, the only parent that is bad, or is considered bad in the text, is Siri's mother. Back on the ship, Siri wakes up and sees an alien hovering over his resurrection pod. This is actually the second time Siri has seen an alien. Spindell tells him he's hallucinating. It's fine. Everybody's hallucinating. Susan is seeing weird patterns. Everybody is hallucinating. It's fine. You're all fine. This is expected from what happened, what we were exposed to on Rorschach. So he talks to Spindell. Spindell has some concerns about Amanda Bates being in charge of the drones. To be clear, Amanda Bates does have drones with her. They are military drones. The Theseus itself is not equipped currently to be a warship, but it has drones. It can make drones for Amanda to use, but they are always on leash. They are always under the command of Amanda Bates. If Amanda dies, or these drones are ever taken off leash, they actually become a lot more dangerous because they will start shooting things just for fun. So the drones are always kept on leash by Amanda Bates. Spindell is not sure he likes this. He thinks that they would be far more efficient and far better at their jobs if they were taken off leash and able to act autonomously. So the crew is going back and forth to Rorschach, killing themselves slowly, and then getting back in their resurrection pods to come back to life, get all of their little tumors removed, clean out all of that radiation, and then turn around, go right back to Rorschach and kill themselves some more. On the sixth trip to Rorschach, Susan has a little bit of another religious experience, she believes that there is language in the magnetism, in there's something, there are words, there is intelligence somewhere here. And it's coming from over there. So she goes over there, and the wall slams shut behind her. Panic. Panic. The entire group starts panicking. The drones start cutting their way through this wall to get Amanda back. Once they get through a membrane, there is a section of reflective material on the inside. So their lasers suddenly go everywhere. Siri is shot in the arm. Spindel is shot in the head. While the resurrection pod can bring you back from most things, brain damage isn't one of them. So Spindel is dead. They do eventually manage to get through this wall, rescue Michelle, who is now the only one awake in the body, get everybody back into the shuttle, get them all back to Theseus. And they discuss what happened. Susan James doesn't remember anything. She was blacked out the entire time. Michelle was in charge of the body. And she remembers very clearly something grabbing her leg, something that she couldn't see. It was invisible. Susan, as mentioned, was not awake, was not aware at this point. Cruncher claims to not remember anything. He doesn't remember anything. He was busy at the time. Sasha was awake, but for some reason could not get in control of the body. She doesn't actually remember anything touching her leg. Sarasti believes Michelle. He shows the rest of the crew the footage that the drones recorded, and he can tell from the light diffraction that there are two things behind this wall. One of them is Susan. The other is something else, but there are two things there. None of the others can see it, but Sarasti is a vampire. He has much better senses than the humans do. So there had to be something there with Michelle, but it is apparently invisible. So Sarasti makes the decision to blow the base camp. Just depressurize it and see what happens. No one is happy about this but Vampire. So no one argues too much. They ask some questions, but they don't argue too much. They think that whatever happens to own Rorschach, or might be there, even though there's no oxygen, might take this as a hostile act. But they do it anyway. So they blow the base camp, depressurize that section of Rorschach, and mycelium, or something that looks mycelium at any rate, grows back to cover the breach. That's how they deal with breaches on Rorschach, is some sort of mycelium. Either way, it is not a wall slamming shut. That's not how they close a breach on Rorschach. And that means, according to Sarasti, that it took some time to set that up. That was a trap. If they had that ability to just do that, they would have done it to seal the breach. They didn't. So that had to be a trap that someone set up and would take a little bit of time to set up. Back in the past, Siri is still having some trouble with Chelsea. I'm going to give you a few quotes. These are just a few things that Siri says to Chelsea while they're having an argument, a discussion. They have a discussion that turns into an argument, and these are just a few of Siri's thoughts, bits of wisdom. You don't want me happy, I said pleasantly. You want me customized. You just want to change me into something more accommodating. You keep pretending this is a partnership. We both know it's a competition. You're trying to manipulate me into playing by your rules. The way you want the relationship run. I don't blame you, Chels, not in the least. We've been trying to manipulate each other for as long as, hell, it's not even human nature, it's mammalian. Granted, your tweaks are a pretty radical iteration. Get right in there and reprogram your mate for optimum servility. You're just doing what comes naturally. So, they wake up, another biologist. They all have backups. They wake up the second biologist. His name is Robert Cunningham. He is now the only biologist available on the ship because there are no other backups. So he can't go. He has to stay on the ship. He is now irreplaceable. They can't afford to lose him. So Sarasti decides that the three of them, the three that are left, the body of Susan James, although only one consciousness will be allowed to be awake while on Rorschach. This is another decision that Sarasti has made. So the body of Susan James, Amanda Bates, and Siri. And they're going to split up because they're going to pick a random section of Rorschach, blow it, get in, get as much information as possible, and get out in 37 minutes. That is the time limit that Sarasti has given them. He has decided that this is the amount of time it would take to set up another trap. Nobody knows how. It's just a decision that he made. He's smart. Vampires are very smart. So they accept that and they split up. And that's when bad things happen. The inset marked Bates skidded hard about. Keat, window and voice cut out together. Not just Bates's window, either. Sasha's inset and the drone's eye's sonarscape flickered and died at the same moment, stripped my HUD bare except for in-suit feeds and a little red readout flashing link down. I spun, but the grunt was still there, 3 meters off my right shoulder. Its optical port was clearly visible, a ruby thumbnail set into the plastron. Its gun ports were visible too, pointing at me. I froze. The drone shivered in some local electromagnetic knot as if terrified. Of me, or of something behind me. I started to turn. My helmet filled with sudden static and with what sounded faintly like a voice. Fucking move, Keat, not... Bates? Bates? Another icon had bloomed in place of linked down. The grunt was using radio for some reason, and though almost close enough to touch, I could barely make out the signal. A hash of Bates speak. To your right in front of... And Sasha as well, a bit more clearly. Auntie, see it? See what? Sasha, someone tell me what? See what? Read. Keaton, do you read? Somehow, Bates had boosted the signal. Static roared like an ocean, but I could still hear the words behind it. Yes, what? Keep absolutely still. Do you understand? Absolutely still. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. The drone kept me in its shaky sights. Dark stereo cam irises spasming wide, stuttering to pinpoints. What? There's something in front of you, Keaton, directly between you and the grunt. Can't you see it? No, my HUD's down. Sasha broke in. How can he not see it? It's right there. Bates barked over her. It's man-sized, radially symmetrical, 8, 9 arms, like tentacles, but segmented, spiky. I don't see anything, I said. But I did. I saw something reaching for me in my pod back aboard Theseus. I saw something curled up motionless in the ship's spine, watching as we laid our best plans. I saw Michelle, the synesthesiac, curled into a fetal ball. You can't see it. It's invisible. What's it doing? I called. Why can't I see it? Why can't I see it? Just floating there, kind of waving. Oh, shit, Keat! The grid skidded sideways as if slapped by a giant hand. It bounced off the wall, and suddenly the laser link was back, filling the HUD with intelligence. First-person perspectives of Bates and Sasha racing along alien tunnels. A grunt's eye view of a spacesuit with Keaton stenciled across its breastplate, and there, right beside it, some thing, like a rippling starfish with too many arms. The gang barreled around the curve, and now I could almost see something with my own eyes, flickering like heat lightning off to one side. It was large, and it was moving, but somehow my eyes just slid off every time they tried to get a fix. It's not real, I thought, giddy with hysterical relief. It's just another hallucination. But then Bates sailed into view, and it was right there. No flickering, no uncertainty, nothing but a collapsed probability wave and solid, undeniable mass. Exposed, it grabbed the nearest wall and scrambled over our heads, segmented arms flailing like whips. A sudden, crackling buzz in the heat of my head, and it was drifting free again, charred and smoking. So they find an alien, and one of the drones shoots it, microwaves it with a gun. They have a little microwave gun. Amanda claims this must have been a fluke, a malfunction, something about the radiation, because she didn't order that. The drone acted autonomously. She puts the drone down with extreme prejudice because it can no longer be trusted. It was acting off leash. They managed to get everyone back with the dead body of the alien that they microwaved. An alien who is, I will note, quite a bit larger than an anaerobic bacteria. So something, someone is home, and they've just killed one. Back on the ship, Cunningham is able to look at this dead alien. Unfortunately, it has been microwaved, so he can't get a whole lot of information. He can't find any genes, and he can confirm that there's no brain. There is an awful lot of nervous tissue because these aliens, I'll note, they look something like octopods, but they are covered in photoreceptive skin, which means their entire skin is covered in eyes of some sort. I don't think they look like human eyes. And they're also covered in chromatophores, which means they can change color, like a chameleon or an octopus. But all of this nervous tissue is being used to control all of the sensory and the movement. There's no brain controlling it. It's all just senses and movement and reflex. That's the only thing all of this nervous system could be used for. There's just not enough nervous system there to do all of the controlling of these many, many, many eyes and many, many, many color-changing chromatophores and the movement and the other senses that they have, and still have some sort of higher intelligence. Dumb as a stick is what Robert Cunningham decides that these aliens are. They can't be intelligent. They have to be, I don't know, a pet of some sort. Sarasti, who is now making all of the decisions, decides that they have to kidnap one. because they microwaved the first one and it's not intelligent, so they need at least one live one. So they send the crew, the 3 people, back to trap one, to try to get a live specimen of one of these aliens. They're called Scramblers in the book. They do find one almost immediately when they breach the ship. There's one just floating there, apparently in the wrong place at the wrong time. It immediately flees from them. They chase it down, and it runs into an entire group of many of them, many scramblers, covering the walls and ceilings of one of Rorschach's hallways. It runs into this group of scramblers, and the other scramblers tear it apart. They just rip it into little pieces. And then they start chasing the humans. The humans flee back towards the shuttle, where there is a trap waiting to hopefully catch one of these things. They do manage to get 2 of them. So they go back, they kidnap a couple. After you've shot one, I guess kidnapping is not that bad. Either way, they get a couple of these things. They manage to get 2 of them in their little trap and get them all the way back to Theseus. And Siri tells us that Amanda Bates is starting to consider a change in command. In the past, Siri has started cheating on Chelsea with a skin, which I believe means virtual sex bot, based on Chelsea, which is a problem for Chelsea. But Siri's having issues with her. She wants to meet she wants to talk about his past. She wants him to meet her family. She cries sometimes, and that's obviously just a manipulative strategy. And Siri is having trouble dealing with all of this. And Chelsea eventually breaks up with him. Because of course she does. Because Chelsea doesn't need this crap in her life. So Chelsea breaks up with him, and he's sick, and he's sad about it. I know, he doesn't feel any emotions. He is a very early 2000s edgy boy, but he does feel sick to his stomach, though. He's not entirely happy about it. He says, or thinks at any rate, I never meant to drive you away completely, just a little bit, just to a safer distance. The only time I haven't felt worthless was when we were together. Siri is a sad, lonely man. And Siri has almost no one to blame for that except himself. Back on the ship, Cunningham has discovered some things. He believes that these scramblers are born with all of the energy they're ever going to get. You need oxygen to have a robust energy maintenance in order to sustain the sort of energy that is used for larger types of mammals. But the scramblers are in an anaerobic environment. There is no oxygen. But this is possible if they store up a large amount of energy over a very long amount of time, perhaps millennium, and then are born with all of that energy ready to use. He calls it sprinting. So they are born, they have all of the energy they're going to use, they use all of it, and then they die. Live fast, die young, basically, according to Robert Cunningham. He also believes that this civil war going on when the group of scramblers tore apart the one scrambler that was fleeing from the humans, he believes that might have been some sort of information exchange. If they consume this other animal They might be able to get some of the information that that animal had. It's a theory. He doesn't actually know, but that is the current theory. What we have figured out at this point is that the Scramblers are talking to each other. This is how you break down the wall. Start with two beings. They can be human if you like, but that's hardly a prerequisite. All that matters is that they know how to talk among themselves. Separate them. Let them see each other. Let them speak. Perhaps a window between their cages, perhaps an audio feed. Let them practice the art of conversation in their own chosen way. Hurt them. It may take a while to figure out how. Some may shrink from fire, others from toxic gas or liquid. Some creatures may be invulnerable to blowtorches and grenades, but shriek in terror at the threat of ultrasonic sound. You have to experiment. And when you discover just the right stimulus, the optimum balance between pain and injury, you must inflict it without remorse. You leave them an escape hatch, of course. That's the very point of the exercise. Give one of your subjects the means to end the pain, but give the other the information required to use it. To one, you might present a single shape, while showing the other a whole selection. The pain will stop when the being with the menu chooses the item its partner has seen, so let the games begin. Watch your subjects squirm. If, when they trip the off switch, you'll know at least some of the information they exchanged. And if you record everything that passed between them, you'll start to get some idea of how they exchanged it. When they solve one puzzle, give them a new one. Mix things up, switch their roles. See how they do at circles versus squares. Try them out on factorials and Fibonacci's. Continue until Rosetta Stone results. This is how you communicate with a fellow intelligence. You hurt it, and keep on hurting it until you can distinguish the speech from the screams. Susan James, congenital optimist, high priestess of the Church of the Healing Word, was best qualified to design and execute the protocols. Are we the baddies? So they've named them Clinch and Stretch. Because if you're going to torture something, you might as well name it first. Either way, Clinch and Stretch are starting to be put through their paces. I would like to remind you that at no point in this book have the humans been attacked yet. They took our picture, which, rude, but not necessarily an attack. They said, don't come here because you wouldn't like it here. But that wasn't a lie. Something did grab Michelle's leg, but as far as we know, didn't harm her. And then we shot one and kidnapped two others that we are proceeding to torture. And at no point have we confirmed any aggressive action. This is where the book shifts from horrifying events to horrifying implications. Although I would suggest that Susan being forced to torture possibly sentient beings in order to communicate with them is pretty horrific. Either way, we're shifting more into the philosophy, the rosy path that Peter Watts is hoping you will follow him down. And I will say that Peter Watts did not come to this fight without any weapons. The author's notes has lots and lots and lots of footnotes. And Peter Watts did not come here without receipts. He does have some evidence for all of the horrifying implications he is making. These are not made up. This is hard sci-fi. Peter Watts is not in here making stuff up. Except for vampires, I guess. Either way, he's not making stuff up. But we're going to get more into that as we get a little further along in the book. So Susan and Cunningham are having a bit of a disagreement because Susan thinks they have to be intelligent. They have to be intelligent. They are answering all of her questions. She can't quite figure out how. She can't quite figure out the language they're using. But she knows that they're communicating. They are doing the correct things. They are reacting to the torture in the correct way. But she can't figure out quite how they're communicating with each other, or at least she cannot figure out the language. And Cunningham insists they can't be intelligent. They can't be that intelligent. They just can't. There isn't enough brain. And then he reveals that it doesn't actually matter because both Stretch and Clinch are dying. Not because of what Susan is doing to them, although I can't imagine that part is helping. They are just dying. They seem to not have metabolic processes. And while they haven't eaten anything while they're there, that shouldn't explain the amount of deterioration. They decide that there's something about Rorschach that is handling their metabolic processes. Something about the magnetic waves, something about the gravity, something in Rorschach is actually handling a lot of their body's processes. And without Rorschach, they are going to die. Cunningham insists that the Scramblers are more like honeycomb, and Rorschach is the bees. Sarasti is not going to release the prisoners. That is a no-go. Sarasti does not think that's an acceptable thing to do. They know too much at this point. So what they do instead is they detach the lab into what they call an inflatable. Just like they did when they breached Rorschach, they inflate a lab and then they set it adrift, anchored to Theseus, and they sort of move in closer so that more of the magnetic waves, more of Rorschach's environment is reaching the Scramblers, who are now in the lab that is now disconnected and sort of floating on an anchor from Theseus. This does help a little bit, but it's not going to entirely save them. Cunningham has figured some things out. He knows why they're invisible, at least part of the time, at least when only one person is perceiving them. "You're blind," he said without turning. "Did you know that?" "I didn't." "You, me, everyone." He interlocked his fingers and clenched, as if in prayer, hard enough to whiten the knuckles. Only then did I notice no cigarette. "Vision's mostly a lie anyway," he continued. "We don't really see anything except a few high-res degrees where the eye focuses. Everything else is just peripheral blur, just light and motion. Motion draws the focus, and your eyes jiggle all the time. Did you know that, Keaton? Saccades, they're called. Blurs the image. The movement's way too fast for the brain to integrate, so your eye just shuts down between pauses. It only grabs these isolated freeze frames, but your brain edits out the blanks and stitches an illusion of continuity into your head." He turned to face me. "And you know what's really amazing? If something only moves during the gaps, your brain just ignores it. It's invisible." Unfortunately, this carries some other implications. For starters, the dumbest of these things can look into your head and see what parts of your visual cortex are lighting up. And if there's a difference between that and mind reading, it's not much of one. As long as we stay out of Rorschach, that ship has sailed. You people have already been there repeatedly. Who knows what you already did down there for no better reason than because Rorschach made you? Wait a second, Bates objected. None of us were puppets down there. We hallucinated and we went blind and crazy even, but we were never possessed. Cunningham looked at her and snorted. You think you'd be able to fight the strings? You think you'd even feel them? I could apply a transcranial magnet to your head right now, and you'd raise your middle finger, or wiggle your toes, or kick Siri here in the sack, and then swear on your sainted mother's grave that you only did it because you wanted to. You'd dance like a puppet, and all the time swear you were doing it of your own free will. And that's just me. That's just some borderline OCD with a couple of magnets and an MRI helmet. He waved at the vast, unknowable void beyond the bulkhead. Shreds of mangled cigarette floated sideways in front of him. Do you want to guess what that can do? For all we know, we've already given them Theseus's technical specs, warned them about the Icarus array, and then just decided, of our own free will, to forget it all. We can cause those effects, Sarasti said coolly. As you say, strokes cause them. Tumors, random accidents. Random? Those were experiments, people. That was vivisection. They let you in so they could take you apart and see what made you tick, and you never even knew it. So what? The vampire snapped invisibly. Something cold and hungry had edged into his voice. Human topology shivered around the table, skittish. There's a blind spot in the center of your visual field, Sarasti pointed out. You can't see it. You can't see the saccades in your visual time stream. Just two of the tricks you know about, many others. Cunningham was nodding. That's my whole point. Rorschach could be not talking about case studies. Brains are survival engines, not truth detectors. If self-deception promotes fitness, the brain lies, stops noticing irrelevant things. Truth never matters, only fitness. By now, you don't experience the world as it exists at all. You experience a simulation built from assumptions, shortcuts, lies. Whole species is agnosiac by default. Rorschach does nothing to you that you don't already do to yourselves. Back in the past, Chelsea is dying. I could tell from her voice that she was dying. Obviously, she wanted to say goodbye. I couldn't talk to her until I knew how to do that. I spent hours scouring the news sphere looking for precedents. There's no shortage of ways to die. I found millions of case records dealing with the etiquette, last words, last vows, instruction manuals for the soon-to-bereaved. Palliative, neuropharm, extended and expository death scenes in popular fiction. I went through it all. Assigned a dozen frontline filters to separate heat from light. By the time she called again, the news was out. Acute Gollum outbreak lancing like a white-hot needle through the heart of Boston. Containment measures holding, heaven secure, modest casualties expected, names of victims withheld pending notification of kin. I still didn't know the principles, the rules. All I had were examples. Last wills and testaments, the negotiation of jumpers with their would-be rescuers, diaries recovered from imploded submarines or lunar crash sites, recorded memoirs and deathbed confessions rattling into flatline, black box transcripts of doomed spaceships and falling beanstalks, ending in fire and static. All of it relevant. None of it useful. None of it her. She called again, and still the optics were blank, and still I didn't answer. But the last time she called, she didn't spare me the view. They'd made her as comfortable as possible. The gel pad conformed to every twisted limb, every erupting spur of bone. They would not have left her in any pain. Her neck had torqued down into the side as it petrified, left her staring at the twisted claw that had once been her right hand. Her knuckles were the size of walnuts. Plates and ribbons of ectopic bone distended the skin of her arms and shoulders, buried her ribs in a fibrous mat of calcified flesh. Movement was its own worst enemy. Gollum punished even the slightest twitch, provoked the growth of flesh bone along any joints and surfaces conspiring to motion. Each hinge and socket had its own non-renewable ration of flexibility, carved in stone. Every movement depleted the account. The body seized incrementally. By the time she let me look at her, Chelsea had almost exhausted her degrees of freedom. "Sig," she slurred. "Know you're there." Her jaw was locked half open. Her tongue must have stiffened with every word. She did not look at the camera. She could not look at the camera. "Guess I know why you're not answering. I'll try not to take it personally." 10,000 deathbed goodbyes arrayed around me, a million more within reach. What was I supposed to do? Pick one at random? Stitch them into some kind of composite? All these words had been for other people. Grafting them onto Chelsea would reduce them to cliches, to trite platitudes, to insults. Want to say, don't feel bad. I know it's not your fault, I guess. You'd pick up if you could. And say what? What do you say to someone who's dying and fast forward before your eyes? Just keep trying to connect, Can't help myself. Although the essentials of this farewell are accurate, details from several deaths have been combined for dramatic purposes. Please, just talk to me, Sig. More than anything, I wanted to. Siri, I'd spent all this time trying to figure out how. Forget it, she said, and disconnected. I whispered something into the dead air. I don't even remember what. I really wanted to talk to her. I just couldn't find an algorithm that fit. I have often felt that human language is inadequate to what we ask it to do. That we ask it to convey so much meaning that it couldn't possibly, because it's just letters. It's just the same 26 letters rearranged to form the same however many words you happen to have in your vocabulary. And half the time, they don't even mean the same thing to different people. We sort of come to a collective agreement about sort of what that word means, but it doesn't actually mean that. It doesn't have any actual meaning on its own. We give it meaning inside our heads. And those two heads could disagree on the exact meaning of that word. Language is messy. We keep changing it. Literally does not literally mean literally anymore. It's on a roller coaster. It keeps moving and it keeps changing and it keeps shifting, and it doesn't actually mean anything anyway. Language is too small to convey the sheer depth of feeling sometimes. I understand that there is nothing to say there, that language is not useful in this situation. Language is entirely inadequate. to say what you actually want to say, to mean what you actually want to mean. But you still answer the phone. You still take the call, man. What? We are not fans of Siri in this house. We are not fans. He is unlikable. I haven't liked him until now, and I don't plan to start liking him anytime in the future. You take the call, Siri. I get it. I get that language is inadequate. I get it. Take the call, Siri. Sarasti calls Siri to his quarters. As an observer. You're an observer? Observe. He starts flooding the lab with oxygen, which is actively harming the Scramblers. That's poisoning them. Siri tries to observe. He's not happy about it, but he does remind himself that he is here as an observer, and he observes. And then Sarasti attacks him physically. He stabs him in the hand. He starts yelling at him. The crew is panicking at this point because they're hearing the alarms going off from the oxygen in the lab. They're hearing Siri screaming. The commander has gone nuts and has started to try to kill Siri while yelling at him. You invest so much in it, don't you? It's what elevates you above the beasts in the field. It's what makes you special. Homo sapiens, you call yourself. Wise man. Do you even know what it is, this consciousness you cite in your own exaltation? Do you even know what it's for? Maybe you think it gives you free will. Maybe you've forgotten that sleepwalkers converse, drive vehicles, commit crimes, and clean up afterward, unconscious the whole time. Maybe nobody's told you that even waking souls are only slaves in denial. Make a conscious choice. Decide to move your index finger. Too late. The electricity's already halfway down your arm. Your body began to act a full half second before your conscious self chose to. For the self chose nothing. Something else set your body in motion, sent an executive summary, almost an afterthought, to the homunculus behind your eyes. That little man, that arrogant subroutine that thinks of itself as the person, mistakes correlation for causality. It reads the summary and it sees the hand move and it thinks that one drove the other. But it's not in charge. You're not in charge. If free will even exists, it doesn't share living space with the likes of you. Insight, then. Wisdom. The quest for knowledge. The derivation of theorems, science and technology, and all those exclusively human pursuits that must surely rest on a conscious foundation. Maybe that's what sentience would be for, if scientific breakthroughs didn't spring fully formed from the subconscious mind, manifest themselves in dreams as full-blown insights after a deep night's sleep. It's the most basic rule of the stymied researcher. Stop thinking about the problem. Do something else. It will come to you if you just stop being conscious of it. Every concert pianist knows that the surest way to ruin a performance is to be aware of what the fingers are doing. Every dancer and acrobat knows enough to let the mind go, let the body run itself. Every driver of any manual vehicle arrives at destinations with no recollection of the stops and turns and roads traveled in getting there. You are all sleepwalkers. Whether climbing creative peaks or slogging through some mundane routine task for the 1000th time, you are all sleepwalkers. Don't even try to talk about the learning curve. Don't bother citing the months of deliberate practice that precede the unconscious performance, or the years of study and experiment leading to the gift-wrapped eureka moment. So what if your lessons are all learned consciously? Do you think that proves there's no other way? Heuristic software's been learning from experience for over 100 years. Machines master chess. Cars learn to drive themselves. Statistical programs face problems and design the experiments to solve them, and you think that the only path to learning leads through sentience? You're Stone Age nomads, eking out some marginal existence on the veldt, denying even the possibility of agriculture because hunting and gathering was good enough for your parents. Do you want to know what consciousness is for? Do you want to know the only real purpose it serves? Training wheels. You can't see both aspects of the Necker cube at once, so it lets you focus on one and dismiss the other. That's a pretty half-assed way to parse reality. You're always better off looking at more than one side of anything. Go on, try, defocus. It's the next logical step. Oh, but you can't. There's something in the way, and it's fighting back. Consciousness is maladaptive, and free will is a lie. What we think of as consciousness is just our conscious brains getting the memo after we have already decided to do something, and then deciding that it's what caused that to happen. Evolution has no foresight. Complex machinery develops its own agendas. Brains cheat. Feedback loops evolve to promote stable heartbeats and then stumble upon the temptation of rhythm and music. The rush evoked by fractal imagery, the algorithms used for habitat selection metastasize into art. Thrills that once had to be earned and increments of fitness can now be had from pointless introspection. Aesthetics rise unbidden from the trillion dopamine receptors, and the system moves beyond modeling the organism. It begins to model the very process of modeling. It consumes ever more computational resources, bogs itself down with endless recursion and irrelevant simulations. Like the parasitic DNA that accretes from every natural genome, it persists and proliferates and produces nothing but itself. Meta-processes bloom like cancer and awaken and call themselves I. The idea of I, self-awareness, wastes energy. Energy that could be put to more productive means. The system weakens, slows. It takes so much longer now to perceive, to assess the input, mull it over, decide in the manner of cognitive beings. But when the flash flood crosses your path, when the lion leaps at you from the grasses, advanced self-awareness is an unaffordable indulgence. The brainstem does its best. It sees the danger, hijacks the body, reacts 100 times faster than that fat old man sitting in the CEO's office upstairs. But every generation, it gets harder to work around this creaking neurological bureaucracy. I wastes energy and processing power, self-obsesses to the point of psychosis. Scramblers have no need of it. Scramblers are more parsimonious, with simpler biochemistries, with simpler brains. Deprived of tools of their ship, even of parts of their own metabolism, they think rings around you. They hide their language in plain sight, even when you know what they're saying. They turn your own cognition against itself. They travel between the stars. This is what intelligence can do, unhampered by self-awareness. I is not the working mind, you see. For Amanda Bates to say, I do not exist, would be nonsense. But when the processes beneath say the same thing, they are merely reporting that the parasites have died. They are only saying that they are free. So scientists use a test called the mirror test to decide whether or not something is self-aware. And Peter makes clear in his footnotes, or at least in his extended author notes, that only something like 50% of chimpanzees do that. What does 50% of a mirror test mean? Can you be half self-aware? Is that possible? How about only half of chimpanzees are self-aware? Is that a thing? Like, what is 50-50 on a mirror test for self-awareness? Is that a spectrum? Is there some ability to be 50% conscious? Also, haven't scientists started talking about how, like, bees could be self-aware or conscious or something? It's insects. I swear I saw a paper where scientists were claiming insects were self-aware or had some sort of consciousness. How would you even test an insect with a mirror? It's a very strange test. Siri wakes up. He's in his tent, this little inflatable bladder that he calls his tent. His hand is a little mangled, but it's been stitched back together and is healing. And he's listening to the rest of the crew talk. They're having some arguments about what they have decided. If consciousness were maladaptive, they say evolution would have weeded it out. Cunningham insists that's not necessarily true. The crew insists that it's got to be better than all of the alternatives. And Sarasti insists that that's only because we grew up on an isolated little planet with no real competition. Siri has decided at this point that Amanda Bates is considering open mutiny, and it's just a matter of time. Siri confronts Cunningham. They have a bit of an argument about empathy. Cunningham tells him that Isaac was observing him. He's kept notes on Siri that Cunningham has been reading. He also thinks it's interesting that Siri has been seeing the aliens since before they ever actually saw an alien. Blindsight. Siri then talks to the gang, although they're not real sure they want to talk to him. They knew Sarasti was going to do something. They just didn't know that was what it was going to be. Susan insists that we attacked them first, which I find strange because I will remind you that to this point in the story, the Scramblers haven't done anything. We're assuming that they've done some things. They've rewired you. They've gotten all of the information that they need from you. We can't prove that. We don't know that they did. It's never said in the text, other than Cunningham insisting. But the idea is that self-awareness struck these aliens as a virus and therefore an attack. Imagine you're a scrambler. Imagine you have intellect but no insight, agendas but no awareness. Your circuitry hums with strategies for survival and persistence, flexible, intelligent, even technological, but no other circuitry monitors it. You can think of anything, yet are conscious of nothing. You can't imagine such a being, can you? The term being doesn't even seem to apply in some fundamental way you can't quite put your finger on. Try. Imagine that you encounter a signal. It is structured and dense with information. It meets all the criteria of an intelligent transmission. Evolution and experience offer a variety of paths to follow, branch points in the flowcharts that handle such input. Sometimes these signals come from conspecifics who have useful information to share, whose lives you'll defend according to the rules of kin selection. Sometimes they come from competitors or predators or other inimical entities which must be avoided or destroyed. In those cases, the information may prove of significant tactical value. Some signals may even arise from entities that, while not kin, can still serve as allies or symbionts in mutually beneficial pursuits. You can derive appropriate responses for any of these eventualities and many others. You decode the signals and stumble. I had a great time. I really enjoyed him, even if he cost twice as much as any other hookers in the dome. To fully appreciate Casey's quartet, they hate us for our freedom. Pay attention now. Understand. There are no meaningful translations for those terms. They are needlessly recursive. They contain no usable intelligence, yet they are structured intelligently. There is no chance they could have arisen by chance. The only explanation is that something has coded nonsense in a way that poses as a useful message. Only after wasting time and effort does the deception become apparent. The signal functions to consume the resources of a recipient for zero payoff and reduced fitness. The signal is a virus. Viruses do not arise from kin, symbionts, or allies. The signal is an attack, and it's coming from right about there. Why an LLM? Are you listening, puppy? Like, why are the aliens making an LLM? If human language is a virus, right? If human language is a virus and it's an attack, then it might make sense to like throw that attack right back at the person using it on you, right? Why not? Lob the grenade back, right? That might make sense. But in order to make an LLM, like you had to know that that was communication that humans used. You don't care. Oh, I get it. Okay, that's fine. So, in order to make an LLM, they had to have studied human language. Like they say at the beginning, Susan James says that she thinks that they've been listening to our communication in solar system for a while, right? And this is how they came up with the name Rorschach. This is how they came up with all the rules of grammar. This is how they came up with an effective Chinese room, right? Which means they were studying human language, which means they realized, or had to have realized at some point, that we were communicating with each other like this, with no apparent ill effect, right? Like it's not a virus to us. So one, why use it? If the grenade is not going to kill us, why would you bother lobbing it back? Why would you bother building one in order to lob it back, right? That makes no sense. And two, like, does nobody stop to think, wait a minute, we can't understand these people's communication, but this is how they communicate. Like, it's idiotic. We think it's idiotic, at least. We think it's dumb. We think it's less fit than it should be. But that's how they communicate. Did nobody think that? Nobody think that? And this is when Rorschach finally makes a move. The first time in the text that the Scramblers attack us is right now. They target the inflatable lab that is now anchored to Theseus, shoot it with something, and it explosively decompresses, sending the two scramblers, Stretch and Clinch, back to Rorschach. We, of course, start shooting anything we can see, but there are scramblers now coming outside of Rorschach. Remember, they can actually survive in a vacuum for some amount of time, although we don't know how long. But they are coming out of Rorschach, and they are reaching out to these scramblers that have been held hostage on our ship. We're trying to kill them. We're trying to take care of any of the pieces, but there's too many. There's too many scramblers, and it's too late. They've gotten pieces of Stretch and Clinch, so if there's information happening, if there is an information exchange going on, they've already got it. Sarasti tells Cunningham and Susan to go get the samples. We need the samples, go get them. Susan can't do it, so Siri offers to go in her place. He and Cunningham get on their EVA suits, they get outside of Theseus, and they start making their way towards the inflatable lab. And that is when another scrambler that had been hiding inside the inflatable lab comes out, grabs Cunningham, and makes a break for it. Something that wasn't static moved in his headlight. Something uncoiled just at the edge of the camera's view. The feet died. Suddenly, Bates and Sarasti were shouting in my helmet. I tried to brake, my stupid, useless legs kicking against a vacuum, obeying some ancient brainstem override from a time when all monsters were earthbound. But by the time I remembered to use my trigger finger, the lab hab was already looming before me. Rorschach reared up behind it in the near distance, vast and malign. Dim green auroras writhed across its twisted surface like sheet lightning. Mouths opened and closed by the hundreds, vicious as bubbling volcanic mud, any one of them large enough to swallow Theseus whole. I barely noticed the flicker of motion just ahead of me, the silent eruption of dark mass from the collapsed inflatable. By the time Cunningham caught my eye, he was already on his way, backlit against the ghastly corpse light flickering on Rorschach's skin. I thought I saw him waving, but I was wrong. It was only the scrambler, wrapped around his body like a desperate lover, moving his arm back and forth while it ran the thrust pistol tethered to his wrist. Bye-bye, that arm seemed to say, and fuck you, Keeton. I watched for what seemed like forever, but no other part of him moved at all. Voices shouting, ordering me back inside. I hardly heard them. I was too dumbfounded by the basic math, trying to make sense of the simplest subtraction. 2 scramblers, Stretch and Clinch, both accounted for, shot to pieces before my eyes. Keeton, do you read? Get back here. Acknowledge. It can't be, I heard myself say. There were only 2. Return to the ship immediately. Acknowledge. I acknowledged. Rorschach's mouth snapped shut at once, as though holding a deep breath. The artifact began to turn, ponderously, a continent changing course. It receded, slowly at first, picking up speed, turning tail and running. How odd, I thought. Maybe it's more afraid than we are. But then Rorschach blew us a kiss. I saw it burst from deep within the forest, ethereal and incandescent. It shot across the heavens and splashed against the small of Theseus's back, making a complete and utter fool of Amanda Bates. The skin of our ship flowed there and opened like a mouth and congealed in a soundless, frozen scream. Things start happening fast at this point. Rorschach immediately turns tail and dives beneath the clouds, the atmosphere of Big Ben. So it is no longer visible to the human eye, although they do try to track it with other things. The skimmers that have been there since the beginning start acting strange. They're up to something, but we don't know what. Susan is told by Sorosty to get back into her coffin. Amanda is staying on the bridge. And Siri is again called to Sorosty's office, to his quarters. Sorosty and Siri have a talk. Siri claims there's no way they can win this fight, and Sorosty agrees with him. And this is when Sorosty figures out that they've been storing up antimatter basically since they got here. And they're not actually using it for anything. They're not building more drones. They're not fitting out Theseus with weapons. Theseus is the weapon. It's full of antimatter. And it's the weapon. I know your race and mine are never on the best of terms. There was a cold smile in his voice, if not on his face. But I do only what you force me to. You rationalize, Keeton. You defend. You reject unpalatable truths. And if you can't reject them outright, you trivialize them. Incremental evidence is never enough for you. You hear rumors of Holocaust, you dismiss them. You see evidence of genocide, you insist it can't be so bad. Temperatures rise, glaciers melt, species die, and you blame sunspots and volcanoes. Everyone is like this, but you most of all. You and your Chinese room. You turn incomprehension into mathematics. You reject the truth without even hearing it first. It served me well enough. I wondered at the ease with which I had put my life into past tense. Yes, if your purpose is only to transmit. Now you have to convince. You have to believe. There were implications there I didn't dare to hope for. Are you saying can't afford to let the truth trickle through? Can't give you the chance to shore up your rationales and your defenses? They must fall completely. You must be inundated, shattered. Genocide's impossible to deny when you're buried up to your neck in dismembered bodies. Sorosty tells Siri that he has to get the message out. He has to be the messenger. They have refitted the Charybdis, which is the second shuttle available on Theseus. And he's going to get in there, and he's going to go back, and he's going to talk to the humans. He's going to try to convince them. At this point, the skimmers reappear from around Big Bend. They are on course to intercept the Theseus. Susan James barricades herself in the bridge, shuts down autonomic overrides, and initiates an unauthorized burn. In response, the captain, Theseus, shuts down the main reactor. And this is when Sorosty starts having a seizure. He has been taking his medication. All vampires are on a medicine called anti-Euclideans in order to stop them from having seizures when they see right angles. This is how we've been keeping them on a leash. Siri did watch Sorosty take his anti-Euclidean medication, but now he's having a seizure. And Siri thinks that can't happen unless someone has been messing with Sorosty's medication. So Sorosty starts having a seizure. Siri calls for help, but the drones that are floating around just sort of ignore him. They are not currently taking orders. So he grabs Sorosty and attempts to get him to the infirmary. Rorschach has reappeared from the planet, although it is now glowing red and moving quite fast. Susan, or someone using Susan's body, because Siri can't actually tell who's in charge, claims that they're getting out of there. But the ship isn't moving because the captain turned off the main reactor. One of the drones that was floating around stabs Sarasti in the head. And this is when Amanda Bates reappears. She claims it's been another malfunction. She disables that drone. She says they're being hit with lightning and EMP pulses, and they are not moving away from the planet or from Rorschach. They're going the wrong direction. She says that Susan is not Susan anymore. Someone else has taken over the body and is currently in charge and appears to be panicking because they are not outbound, they are inbound. Why an LLM? And why did the LLM tell us the truth? Why did it give us useful information? Like, depending on how you timeline out the events when everything is happening very fast at the end of the book, it is also possible that they do in fact kill Susan first. Because, like, they didn't kill Isaac. We did that. They did kill Cunningham. We can blame them for Cunningham. But we don't actually see Susan after Siri says he'll take over. So, when did this new personality take over Susan? Assuming it is this new personality, and assuming it did take over, assuming it was like implanted in her while she was in Rorschach, they did in fact kill Susan first. So they like never lied to us. Why? Why tell us the truth? Why tell us the truth? Why create an LLM to tell us the truth? Scramblers have been launched from Rorschach. They are now breaching the ship. And when Siri says, okay, what the hell do I do? Sarasti's corpse grabs him by the shoulder and turns him around. And Amanda Bates says, go with him. Amanda Bates is staying. She's going down with the ship. The captain, Theseus, has taken control of Sarasti's corpse. Explains, using a touchpad, that he had to because Sarasti was seizing and he could not control him. Captain throws him into the Charybdis and launches him. The Charybdis manages to make it behind Big Ben mere seconds before an explosion takes out both Rorschach and Theseus. I can't miss Juka Sarasti. God knows I try every time I come online. He saved my life. He humanized me. I'll always owe him for that, for however long I live. And for however long I live, I'll never stop hating him for the same reason. In some sick, surrealistic way, I had more in common with Sarasti than I did with any human. But I just don't have it in me. He was a predator, and I was prey, and it's not in the nature of the lamb to mourn the lion. Though he died for our sins, I cannot miss Juka Sarasti. I can empathize with him, though. At long last, I can empathize with Sarasti, with all his extinct kind, because we humans were never meant to inherit the earth. Vampires were. They must have been sentient to some degree, but that semi-aware dream state would have been a rudimentary thing to our own self-obsession. They were weeding it out. It was just a phase. They were on their way. The thing is, humans can look at crosses without going into convulsions. That's evolution for you. One stupid linked mutation and the whole natural order falls apart. Intelligence and self-awareness stuck in counterproductive lockstep for 500,000 years. I think I know what's happening back on Earth. And though some might call it genocide, it isn't really. We did it to ourselves. You can't blame predators for being predators. We were the ones who brought them back, after all. Why wouldn't they reclaim their birthright? Not genocide, just the righting of an ancient wrong. I've tried to take some comfort in that. It's difficult. Sometimes it seems as though my whole life's been a struggle to reconnect, to regain whatever got lost when my parents killed their only child. Out in the Ort, I finally won that struggle, thanks to a vampire and a boatload of freaks and an invading alien horde. I'm human again. Maybe the last human. By the time I get home, I could be the only sentient being in the universe. If I'm even that much, because I don't know if there is such a thing as a reliable narrator, and Cunningham said zombies would be pretty good at faking it. So I can't really tell you one way or the other. You'll just have to imagine you're Siri Keeton. Did Sarosty ever have free will? Like, was he ever making his own decisions? Siri kind of asked this, like when Captain is pushing him into the Charybdis, he's like, hey, did Sarosty ever exist? And the Captain just says something like, you don't like taking orders from computers, you're happier this way. But I notice that's not an answer. That's not an answer. But this also brings up, like, who messed with Sorosti's meds, right? He's on these medications, these anti-Euclideans, to stop him from going into seizures. And Siri thinks somebody has to have messed with his meds, right? Because otherwise he wouldn't be having seizures. So who was messing with Sorosti's meds? The Captain, if the Captain was controlling them the whole time, like, the Captain wouldn't need to kill him. Like, if the Captain already had a way to control Sorosti the whole time, he wouldn't need to cause him to go into convulsions and then kill him and then take over his corpse. Like, that, none of that makes sense, right? So Sorosti had to have some sort of free will, right? Like, he couldn't just... You don't care. You don't care. The basic theory here is that self-awareness is maladaptive. Self-consciousness is maladaptive. That it's not doing us any good. This is the devastating part of the book that people talk about. And the argument that the crew actually does present is that if awareness, if consciousness were maladaptive, evolution would have weeded it out a long time ago. And Peter Watts's argument to that is yet. Self-awareness hasn't been weeded out yet. And you know what that is. You know what that is. I can hear you in the back yelling the answer. That is unfalsifiable. Consciousness could continue for 1 billion years, and you could still say that evolution hasn't weeded it out yet. It's an unfalsifiable conclusion. Do we actually know what consciousness is good for? There are a few theories, quite a few theories, many actually. I think Nature put out an entire magazine of nothing but theories about what consciousness is good for. I'm not going to go through all of them. But we don't actually know for sure what consciousness is good for yet, although we do have some ideas, and some of them directly contradict what Peter Watts puts forth in this book. It has been 20 years, and we still don't have a conclusive answer to that. But I am not devastated. I am not devastated. Because Peter Watts' argument is unfalsifiable. There's no way to prove that, right or wrong. And he does admit that in his author's notes. And he does say that he hopes that consciousness is good for something, that it turns out to be a strength and not a weakness. I did have a few thoughts when I read this. Things like, how does one develop a theory of mind if one has no concept of self? Don't you require a concept of self in order to have a theory of mind? Peter Watts actually addresses that exact claim in his author's notes, and he links to a paper that he claims says, no, you don't actually require self-consciousness in order to develop a theory of mind. I did try to read that paper. You can find it if you Google the exact reference he gives you in his footnote. You can find that paper, but it's $30. And in this economy, I got to tell you, it's not worth $30 to figure out whether my consciousness is maladaptive. I'm just going to accept it. That's fine. That's fine. There are some very interesting ideas, I think, in this book. I do appreciate that for as unlikable as I find Siri to be, I did end this story feeling very sorry for him. Yes, he is an early 2000s edgy boy. Yes, he is unlikable. Yes, he is lying to himself and others. He is an unreliable narrator. He is an unlikable protagonist. And he is a sad, sad, lonely human being. There are a lot of parts of myself that I find in Siri Keeton. I am not a bioessentialist. That annoys me. It offends me. I am personally offended by the idea that because I look like this, that I am whatever you have decided I am. I don't like that idea. I am personally offended by that idea. But there are other parts of Siri's personality that I understand. And that is perhaps why I hate him as much as I do. And that is perhaps why I feel as sorry for him as I do. I do find it interesting that as much as we are led to believe, we are led down the rosy path by Peter Watts to believe that the aliens are attacking us, they don't until the very end of the book. There is no proof of anything Cunningham has said that they have done to us. There is no proof that they decided that human language was an attack. I'm not even entirely sure that they would. I mean, I don't know. He says it in a fairly compelling way. But would they really? And even if they did decide it was a virus, are we sure that they would come looking for more rather than try to stay away? Is that what they were actually doing, trying to stay away from us? When we found them around Big Ben, they did tell us, don't come here. Don't do this. It's not healthy for you here. They told us the truth, even though, this is another weird part, it was an LLM, and we are told it was an LLM, and we were told that they don't understand the language, and yet they did not lie to us. Told us the absolute truth about, hey, you're not going to like it here. And we didn't. We did not like it. The treatment of vampires in this book is honestly one of the coolest things in this book. The idea that an author finally found a way to make crucifixes actually hurt vampires is interesting. I like that. I like the crucifix glitch. I love the way Peter Watts writes. He does horror very well. He is very poetic. I'm not sure that I buy everything that Peter Watts is telling me. I'm not sure he is not selling me on a bridge. But he does have some compelling evidence backing him up. I will agree to that much. We are still arguing whether or not we have free will. But irregardless of whether or not we have free will, does that make consciousness itself a problem? Is that a weakness? Or is that a strength? Do you buy what he's saying? Is this devastating? Did I just devastate you with this book? Is that did you get it? Did you follow Peter Watts far enough down that rosy path to feel like, oh God, what am I doing here? Or do you have questions? Do you have many, many questions like I have? I really want to know what you think about that. I really want to talk about that with somebody. I want somebody who maybe actually knows a thing to tell me like how they feel about that and what it means. If you or someone you know has dissociative identity disorder, I would really appreciate you telling me how you feel about the depiction of multiple personalities in this book and the character of Susan James. I like Susan. I think Susan's a wonderful human being. She's probably the most likable of the cast. Please leave a comment. Please subscribe. Please like. Please share. You know, it's the algorithm. We are all slaves to the algorithm. Either way, that is Peter Watts' Blindsight, and I will be back in 2 weeks, probably,